Hi guys, how are you doing? I hope great. But I'm going to ask you a question. What happens when you find yourself in a fight for something that you really care about? A fight, let's say, for the custody of your kids, because that happens every day all over. It happened to me. It's happened to people I know. On today's show, we welcome Renee Rodriguez, who is a custody coach and founder of Best Foot Forward. It's a company with a singular mission, helping parents navigate family court and contentious custody situations. And her turning point was during her own custody battle for her son after leaving a relationship that had a lot of mental abuse. And she's been an acting coach for decades now and has switched her career to help other women succeed in dealing with their narcissistic nightmares, which I love that because the narcissism part with my exes. So welcome, Renee. And why don't we start with you saying hello and introducing yourself?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for having me, Mimi. I'm grateful to be here. Yes, so I am. Lovely introduction. Yes, I'm Renee Rodriguez, and when I went through what I went through, I never imagined that I would have gotten to that place in the first place, and then would have gotten me here. So it's good to be here to chat with you today a little bit about that journey and what what hope there is for parents in the same situation.
Yes. Yeah. So what was your light bulb moment, do you think, that changed your life, like that got you to this point where you wanted to help other people, parents?
It was really facilitated by my own divorce coach, and it's rather interesting. I think so many people even now don't know what a divorce coach is because it's really only been around for about 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
years or so. And I ended up finding a woman who I will say really kind of started all of this. Her name is Tina Swithin. She's the head of One Mom's Battle. And at the time, she was doing coaching, and there was not really any such thing, right? You might get some advice from a lawyer or from a therapist, but you wouldn't really have somebody so laser focused on this. And when I first went into my custody case, I interviewed 13 lawyers, and lucky 13, it is one of my lucky numbers. Um, he said the right thing. When I told him my story, he said, "You need to get control of your own life back." And I thought, this guy gets it. But even though he was good, I knew something was missing. And I had a background in strategy. I'd run strategy for a lot of nonprofits, was working at consultancies that worked on strategy. And so strategy was very much my background, which ended up playing into this as well. Because realizing that I was missing a real strategy and realizing that there was a gap that needed to be breached. At that time, you have to understand, we talk about narcissism, you go on the internet, you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
10 years ago, that word was not in the zeitgeist. It just wasn't.
That's
Let alone,
like, yeah, that's like gaslighting, I have to say, because 2 years ago I was using the word gaslighting. My children did not know what I was talking about. Now everybody's saying gaslighting, which goes hand in hand with a narcissist. That's one of their behaviors, right?
very much so.
You know, so I know what you mean. I want though to share your personal journey first and how it became well, what did it become? Did it become combative or hostile or what happened?
I would say that the abuse started as soon as I announced that I was pregnant.
Wow.
There were red flags before then, and we hear this often now from our own clients. It's the day that they announced they were pregnant, or the day they got married, or the day after these things. Suddenly there's it's like a light switch. The facade slips, it's gone. And I know we talk about narcissism, but really what I'm talking about is narcissistic personality disorder.
Uh-huh.
And that's where that abuse comes in. And so the cruelty was just fascinating. And it really has to do with, you talk about gaslighting, perfect word, of which you're right, at the time, nobody really knew what that was. But what it looked like was that if I did something wrong, I was given the silent treatment, sometimes for days. I was punished if I said or did something that didn't please, my partner at that time. And I think it's important to pause here and say that, I was running a theater company, I was teaching and coaching, I was also working strategy and high-level deputy administration in a very, very very well-known names around me for all of these things, from the New York Times to Variety magazine. I was surrounded by high-powered people. I was a go-getter. I was highly successful. And so I think it's important to say that because people picture a weak person falling prey,
Right.
or people look at people who are stronger and say, well, there must be some, why didn't they leave? It must not have been that bad. There's such a lack of understanding about how gradual it
Yes.
is and how subtle it is and how the insidiousness of it is, that it actually enters your brain and just starts to instill doubt in things that you can have been praised for something for 1, 5, 10, 20 years. And yet this kind of abuser comes along and casts doubt about your abilities with that thing, with that
Yeah,
area, with that skill.
absolutely. I have a chapter in my book uh, about my one ex-husband. I've had two, and I call it Death by a Thousand Cuts.
Right.
And it took me a very long time to arise above my codependency, my lack of self-esteem, the fact that he was a narcissist, that he was gaslighting me, that, all of the things that I had to come to know. And I wasn't ready to know those things, if that makes sense, at that time in my life. Yeah. So I do talk about that and I understand it totally, totally. So, that's the challenges of marrying someone, and you mentioned in the beginning the facade, because you think you're marrying this one person, and then after it's like, uh-oh, what just happened? And sometimes it's subtle, like you said. It could be like with me, it was he didn't want me to wear makeup and tell me how
Mm-hmm.
to dress, that kind of thing. So, I call that grooming. And because if you go along with it, then they go, oh, okay, I got a chance of shaping her, you know. And you have to find that point where it's like, no, I'm not going that far, you know. And that was accepting behavior that was unacceptable, like cheating and alcoholism and mental, all that stuff. Um, so when you see, now you had your own problems, I assume, with your custody of your children. What happened there?
So we ended up, the battle it went on for quite a long time, right? And, the problem with having someone who has placed you under coercive control, the gaslighting, the grooming, as you say, is that the courts don't understand it. They don't know what to do with that. And there are certainly a lot of legislation, a lot of bills around coercive control,
Hmm.
becoming famous, Kira's Law, Jennifer's Law, Peaky's Law, and there's more.
Yeah.
Um, but it takes a while for those to trickle down, and there's always going to be resistance to new laws, and there's a lot of resistance to these as well.
Yes.
So we celebrate when this legislation takes place, when it happens, when it's put into place,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that it's going to help our case anytime soon.
Right.
And so it really, what my battle was how do I show the court what I'm dealing with here, that actually I was living, I was in a living hell. Every day I was miserable. I was shrinking inside of myself. I had become a shadow of myself. All of my successes were crumbling. I had been building a theater company that famous playwrights had come to see and was just about to move off Broadway. We were starting to talk about people who wanted to fund us to go
Hmm.
the next step to off Broadway. And suddenly all of the company members were leaving because he was a part of it. Um, they were telling me they couldn't stand him, they couldn't deal with him. And interestingly, I'm starting to see it, but still making the excuses for it. Still, once you are with somebody, once they've groomed you and they've gotten you, you start finding reasons. Maybe they're going through a rough patch. Maybe it's this. Oh, they had a rough past. Oh, they talk about this. Oh, we find reasons to, because let me pause here and say, these abusers go after people who are empaths, and empaths in turn are likely to say, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I want to find ways to understand you.
Yeah,
And for the codependency bit, where that might be there, to even help fix you.
exactly. And I was the child of an alcoholic. So I was already groomed to be
Yeah.
codependent, and that's what happens, right? So your ex, how far did he go in this battle for custody?
So we ended up, the court case continued and continued and continued, failed mediations, etc. We would mediate, and then, there would be a refusal to sign, right?
How many children? I'm sorry, I forgot to ask that. Are we talking about one? Okay, gotcha. Boy or girl?
Boy, yes. I
I
never
asked that for a reason. I
right.
asked that for a reason. I think there's a little bit of importance to that.
There is.
That
Yeah.
he would fight over if it was a girl, maybe he would not have, you
Uh,
know?
it always depends on how controlling they are. But when we look at, over the years, as we've looked at our own clients in this work, there is a pattern for sure amongst many narcissists that it's the boys. Usually the oldest boy. It's the boys, right?
Mhm.
Um, oh goodness, you had asked. How far we got in the battle.
Yeah,
So
how bad was it?
this case went on and on to the point where we reached a point where we had to do what's called a custody evaluation. It might be called a forensic evaluation, right? Depends on your jurisdiction. So
Mhm.
we had a custody forensic evaluation that we needed to undergo because we just couldn't solve it, right? It just kept going. Now,
Mhm.
the thing I didn't realize at the time was that 85 to 90% of judges will go along with whatever the custody evaluator recommends for custody, even if you go to trial. Some lawyers that I've talked to even say that it's as high as 95%. And I've certainly heard plenty of judges say, these are the experts. I'm just going to go along with what they say. But
Mhm.
I did have a sense of the importance of it because my lawyer said, look, this is what you need. This is more important than convincing the judge. This evaluator is the one.
Mhm.
Back to my divorce coach and I said, look, I got to do this. And she said, yeah, definitely. But this is not my wheelhouse. And there's only two people in the United States or Canada, and really in the world that I know of, that will help people prepare for this. And I
Mhm.
believe that they are booked forever. Let me check. She went to them, she came back. She said one of them's not doing it anymore because she can't take the stories of abuse anymore. She doesn't want to live with them.
Yeah, yeah.
The other one was booked for months. And she said, Renee, you have this strategy background, you have this high level background. Just create something and let's work on it together. So I put together sort of a set of templates for myself that I would then put the abusive behaviors, the problematic behaviors in there to show to the evaluator. And next time that I met with my coach, I said, here's what I've got. And she said, my goodness, I have never seen abuse laid out so clearly for a court case in my life. She
Mhm.
said, you should be doing this.
Did you
So
want 100% custody? Were you trying for full custody?
I was trying for primary custody,
That's
and
okay. That makes a difference.
decision
Mhm.
making. The practically would the holy grail is the joke,
You
right?
can have them on weekends.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. But
everybody.
it's something that, some better way of, so many moms are looking for ways, so many protective parents are looking for ways to protect their kids. And
Mhm.
we know, and I want to say this because it's so often when we talk about this, there's this compilation of studies that many family courts use that proves that 50-50 is better for the children. But if you actually read the studies, if you actually read them, every one of these studies includes a line that says, none of this holds true if there's contention between the parents or abuse or etc. But that's not the part that anybody's paying attention to. When you look at the studies that are looking at a problem parent, an abusive parent, there's hands down agreement that really the other parent should have supervised access.
Oh,
But it's nigh on impossible to get that. So then the better thing to go for is that we do have what was once traditional during the tender age doctrine, which is, every other weekend they have time with the other parent, right?
mhm.
Uh, but that's unpopular, and I'm feel certain that
Mm.
you'll get lots of comments saying, how wrong this is, but the research just doesn't, that's what the research shows us. If we really actually look at the research versus take what people, I love reading research, I love reading studies. And what you can find when you actually read things instead of accept what people have said about them really tells you what the reality is. And I think that that's so important.
I have a great grandson actually, and his parents came up with it's sort of 50-50, but my granddaughter, it's hard for me to believe I'm a great grandmother. My granddaughter will drop my lovely great grandson off Thursday night, and he's with his father until Monday morning. And this way, her work schedule is a type of job where she can be flexible. But um, so when she gets him on Monday, she doesn't have to work. She tries to work on the weekends, right? It works out pretty well. And they are very good about communicating to each other if it's a special event, like it's Sunday. Dad's supposed to have him, but my mom is having something, an event, an Easter egg hunt, whatever. And luckily, her ex is very good about that. Now, I'm just going to real quick tell you this little horror story of mine. In the 70s, we just did not have any guardrails. There were no guardrails. Mom usually just kept the kids, and dad paid child support and saw them on the weekends. But my narcissistic ex-husband didn't want the divorce, didn't want me to have a life. So he did not pay child support and found many, many ways to avoid that, which forced me, I had a 3 and a 4-year-old, to I took advantage of the government. God bless our government. I don't care what anybody says, because I needed food stamps, I needed welfare, I needed childcare, and I wanted to go to college. And they gave me all that.
Yeah.
And I'm forever grateful because that's how I survived. So knowing all this, some weekends he wouldn't even come get them. He would say he was going to get them, 2 girls. Remember, that's why I asked you about the boy thing. And he would not show up. And he got a girlfriend. And once he got a living girlfriend, then he wanted them because he had a babysitter. Totally. And one weekend he took them and he didn't bring them back to punish me. Another one of his, Machiavellian moves. So then he called and said, oh, she doesn't have the kids. Take away her food stamps and her assistance and everything. And he said, you'll get them on the weekends now. Well, he didn't crush me. I'm a very strong woman. I thought, hey, weekends are better. And I got a job and I supported myself and I continued and I saw my kids on the weekends and I adapted and they adapted. So one Easter Sunday, I was at my parents' house and he had the children. Now, man, remember they're like 4 or 5 years old, they're babies. And there was a knock on the door, and here are my 2 beautiful little girls with their little suitcases. And they said, Mommy, Daddy said if you don't want us, he's going to put us in an orphanage. Now, that's not a sick, psychopathic person. So wow, I just could not believe anybody would be that sick. I said, of course I want you. And then I had to turn everything back around. quit the job, go back to what I was doing before, which is fine, you know. But mm, I won't say men, I'll say some partners
Mhm.
can be very sadistic and evil to the point where they're not even thinking about the children.
No.
It's like spite. It's like spite towards the mate, I believe. Do you think so? Do you kind of think that's part of it sometimes?
Yeah, there's some really interesting studies out there on this as well, and it's there's it's very much about punishing, right? And there are most psychologists believe who study narcissism believe that people who do have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, are actually not capable of love. And there are MRI scans that show that that the connection leading to empathy
Mhm.
is actually not there, just never formed, right, from the trauma in the childhood, right?
Believe that.
And as for punishment, you use the word Machiavellian. Yeah, it's very much when I was growing up, we had this whole sort of, the world revolves around you was a very common phrase. Um, I think as an adult, I now understand that that is a reality for people beyond sarcasm or insult, that it is very, very real for
Mhm.
narcissistic personality disordered people,
Yeah.
that they do believe that the world revolves around them and they simply must. That's all their brain will tell them. So we talk about, getting help when you are older and becoming a better person. But I've had a really interesting conversation with a psychologist who said, well, there are two kind of people who we simply cannot cure: pedophiles and narcissistic personality disorder.
Well, narcissists don't think they have a problem to begin with.
We do not think they have a problem,
Oh,
right? And
so
it's not even fixable if they
they
did.
don't need help. And the funny you bring that up. I tried marriage counseling before I divorced this man, and we went to Catholic social services. I was Catholic at the time, and we sat there for the hour, and he never spoke. And the counselor tried all the little tricks in his bag. He said, well, that time there was smoking everywhere. There was an ashtray. And he said, when the ashtray's in front of Mimi, then she's going to talk. The one I put in front of you, then you talk.
Hmm.
Well, he would do that. And of course, he wouldn't say a word still. So we didn't get him to talk it up. And so the counselor said to me, let's do separate counseling. I'll see you separately. So we did that for a while. And then the counselor told me he doesn't talk to me when you're not there either. He does not want to do anything to save this marriage. And I'm going to tell you right now, you are a smart, attractive young woman. I was maybe 30, even younger. He said, divorce him and put yourself through college because he is going to take you down to the ground. And I laughed because this was Catholic social services who does not believe in divorce. And I took his advice. I did. And it was hard. But sometimes, that's why I said he was a narcissist. He wasn't going to do marriage counseling. He showed up for appearances, but
Yeah.
he didn't think he had a problem.
No.
It was me, you know.
Yeah, that's what they
I,
say.
I I wouldn't do what I was told. Yeah. So how do you help parents like navigate these challenges that we're talking about?
Hmm. Well, so, you know, I'd mentioned before that I created these templates that
Mhm.
were that my coach was impressed with. And then she started sharing them with others. And I was encouraged to build off of those given my skill set.
Mhm.
I did. And I ended up creating a whole sort of A to Z, although, so what I do is I help protective parents who are in this type of custody battle
Mhm.
against this type of narcissistic co-parent or abuser to prepare for court, go in and show the court what's really going on and get the custody arrangement that's best for their kids.
Right.
The templates that I talked about that I expanded, we definitely go through the A to Z of here's how you're going to need to prepare your case given who you're up against and the fact
Mhm.
is pretty blind to this type of thing. So we have people come in at different angles. We take a look at, here's your case. So what do we need to come in with? What have you got? How do we want to put that together? And the templates that I created, we started affectionately calling them our custody blueprint, right? And then we realized, well, we have the name of the methodology. There it is. So it is the custody blueprint, which we registered. We use that to talk about the fact that we've got 3 pillars that we're working with each of our clients with.
Mm.
It's evidence,
Mhm.
it's mindset, and it's strategy. And the
Okay.
reason why we have the 3 pillars is because when people come in and they first find us, they know they need one of those things. They're begging for a strategy, most of them. Second highest on the totem pole of importance is for them is I've got all this evidence. I don't know how to organize it, and I definitely don't know how to present it.
Okay.
And we do sometimes have people come and say, I'm not appearing well in court. I need help with that. For the most part, people are more focused on the strategy or evidence. But we have found that we can help people devise amazing strategies to partner with their lawyers on. We can really help people figure out what evidence to select and go in with so they don't hurt their own case with too much evidence. But even if we have those things on lock, if they walk in and the mindset, if they don't have the right core persona, if they're not really talking about their parenting and going against their co-parents' narrative as well as they need to,
Mhm.
and they end up shooting themselves in the foot. There's a
Right.
sense of justice that comes with even having to be in the situation, with even having to send their children 50-50 over to a household with a parent who doesn't even know the children's teachers' names or best friends' names or favorite color or
Wow.
favorite food, right? And
Yes.
we agree with all of that. Um, but we basically bring people in, and there's a number of ways we help them. For people who can work with me as a consultant and my team, right, then we bring them into some of our top tier programs. And that's where we are really white gloving it with them and sitting and saying, let's take a look at what you've got. You do this part to prepare it for us. So we see what you've got. We're going to go in and take a look at that and help you figure out what to put before your lawyer. And we're always saying, as long as we've said, yes, your lawyer should see it, make sure your lawyer sees it. If we say maybe your lawyer should see it, make sure your lawyer sees it. And if we say no, this isn't going to move the needle in any court anywhere,
Mhm.
let it go and stop paying your lawyer to look over stuff that actually isn't going to matter,
Exactly.
valid, even
Right.
though it is something that should be stopped, that the children
Yeah.
should be protected from.
I know.
We know that the court doesn't care about a good amount of stuff.
So, can you share one of your success stories with us?
Hmm,
Maybe that would be helpful.
goodness, I love our success stories. Well,
Yeah.
gosh, let's go with, here's one that popped into my mind. So we had a client who, when she came in, she had video. She had video of the abuse. There was, and I realize that most people who listen to you understand that there are trigger warnings attached to what we talk about, but I really want to give a real trigger warning to what I'm about to share, which is to say that, like many of our clients, she had managed to capture on video strangulation attempts and, attacks on the children,
Mm.
and capture things that the children were saying, which many people consider wrong. But it's like, how else do the children have a voice when they're considered too young to be listened to,
Yeah.
than when they are disclosing things to the people who they do trust, right?
Mhm.
She had all of these things and she didn't know what to do with it. Nobody was really listening to her. Her lawyer felt like she was too much. She would communicate with her lawyer and wouldn't hear back very much. She was told that she had too much stuff to let all of it go. And when I started working with her, I said, my God, no, let's organize this and then let's figure out how to present. So I
Mhm.
went with that. I worked with her on the way she was appearing. We practiced finding a calmer, authentic self to be able to talk that didn't give in to his he had all 3 of the usual narcissist narratives. He had the whole, she's the actual abuser,
Yeah.
she's mentally ill, and in these ways, she's alienating our children against me. So he had all 3 of the big ones. And so, we made sure that her core persona not only went against that without her having to say much of a word about that, but that her appearance clearly belied his words. We
Mhm.
We found ways to transcribe and get the videos in. We found a particular strategy in terms of getting it in before the judge ever even saw it, so that the people who the judge trusted to hear what they had to say about it had just walked into court from having taken a listen and taken a look at these videos. And, we hear this from time to time when we're able to get evidence presented in the right way, that people describe the court professional who is working with them, whether it's a guardian ad litem or someone else, as turning white as a sheet when they actually hear or see what was actually going on, versus the wonderful, charming,
Oh, yeah.
lovely, soft, gentle way
Yes.
that these abusers present themselves. So she went
Sure.
in and she had been asking for sole custody,
Mhm.
supervised visitation, and sole legal custody as well. And she achieved all of it. So
That's,
her child started thriving right away, even started growing better, if you can believe it.
oh, I do.
Much
Yeah.
happier, was eating better,
Mhm.
all of the things that you see. Of course, we do have the 14th Amendment, which means that we do have to, as long as a parent is interested in parenting, they have to be allowed to do so according to our Constitution. But we can do that in a supervised way. And that is what ended up happening. And the
Good.
child resists those, both of the children actually resist, because I'm thinking of the one that needed more help. Both of the children resist those visits for sure, but they're brief and they're child led, so it's like a whole lot of driving somewhere for about 1.5 to 2 minutes, and then it's done. So I don't
Basically, the child doesn't want to go. You're saying the child doesn't want
the
to.
child doesn't. And so what we have the mom do is we have her record everything before and after to show that she is not even now alienating the children against their abuser and their mother's abuser. And but when you listen to, the supervisors have recordings of those 1 or 2 minute visits. Even now, the abusive parent just doesn't know how to operate around children. So I don't know how this client, I'm going to knock on wood, would ever come back being accused of alienation, given the fact that on recording at the supervision center, we have the types of things he says to the children. It's kind of like, well, what child, what adult, what anybody would want to be around somebody who is approaching FaceTime in this way? So
Exactly.
that's one of our success stories.
I'm
But we
glad to hear it. What advice would you give to parents who are just beginning the custody process? Like they just broke up and they have to talk about it.
Yeah. The two biggest things I would say is document before you go, and build a village. And briefly,
Mhm.
documenting, meaning if you can. Most people don't find us until after they've left. It would be great if we find them before, but then when we do find them before and they find out what we do, they don't feel like they need us. So they end up coming back to us after the case goes sideways, right? And then unfortunately, it's an uphill battle as soon as you don't go in prepared. Our motto is don't go into court until you know you've won. But
But
instead, people go into court believing that it's kind of like, I'm going to tell family court my story and
yeah,
they're going to protect my children. And it is just the weakest possible way to walk into court.
well, yes, because there are, and you talked about it, some systemic issues in the family court system.
There are, yeah, that
They
doesn't
need to be
mean, I mean, that's
addressed.
where strategy comes in, right? That's where you need to be
Yeah.
strategic. So we like for our clients to get hold of all of the paperwork if they are in a state in which they're allowed to stealthily record, in other words, a one-party consent state.
Mhm.
Then if there are things that are going on, we want those recordings. We need those recordings. We need recordings, not just of the bad stuff that's being done to them, but we almost need a little bit of self-voyeuristic recording to show that the accusations that their co-parent is making about them are simply not true, right? They should walk out with paperwork about from bank accounts. They should walk out with you know, uh, any insurance paper, any important paperwork. They need to have copies of for sure,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then the other thing is they need to build a village without fail. We have simply never had a client come in who didn't say, I thought all I needed was a lawyer.
Hmm.
So we now say, we advise people before you leave, or if you've just left, Get yourself the good lawyer if you can afford it. We do recommend it. Get yourself a good therapist if your judge doesn't look at that as a way of you admitting that you're mentally ill. So try to find out first. Get your children therapists before you leave while you still can do it without having to, a fight about it, right? Because if you're married and you make decisions together, then there you go, right? If he's all kind of like, I don't care, whatever. Get your children therapists who are certified in trauma therapy, certified in trauma therapy.
Hmm.
So get those for your children in place before you go, because man, abusers will not allow parents to get them after they've left. They don't want these professionals being able to stand up for the children and saying what's really happening.
Oh,
They don't
yeah.
want to silence these children, right? Um, get yourself, I like for people to have a divorce coach. I think it's a really good support system.
Oh, yeah. Now that I know about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we have
great.
good coaches. And then if you can, get yourself a strategist, right? This is where we come in. This is where my company comes in. We come in and we basically help people with case prep and strategy. We don't give legal advice. We don't do therapy, but we do have a certified level 3 IFS and trauma recovery coach there,
Mhm.
not to give therapy, but to help people with that mindset piece, to help them not show up in court playing right into the abuser's
Oh, yeah.
narrative, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. The
So we
angry
have
woman, or, she's just crazy. She's just exaggerating. She's not at
all
him. So
eyes
she's
and
saying,
yeah, that type of thing.
So,
And so we coach it that way. And then we have our Pro Se Clinic at proseclinic.net for people who just cannot afford a lawyer. We want everyone to have a lawyer, even though we hate the legal fees. We know that your chances of winning if you go into court without a lawyer and they have one are 20%. And so we know you need that lawyer, but if you can't afford it, then we have education at proseclinic.net. But at thecustodyblueprint.com is where people can sort of come into our higher level, get our consulting help, our strategy, and our coaches as well.
I'm going to put that in the show notes so people can find those tools. And so, do you think that family court system, do you think there's some things that could be improved about the system itself?
Yes. Yeah.
Basic,
Yeah.
easy fixes even,
I'm so sorry.
even
Um,
easy fixes.
for me, I think there are two things that need to be fixed. And it really does start, the two pieces are training and dealing with biases. Uh,
Mm,
I think the training, when once people become professionals, all you have to do to fulfill training, for example, domestic violence training in many jurisdictions, I'm speaking generally here,
mhm,
is to go do 1.5, 2 hours a year of some sort of a workshop, maybe at a conference, maybe at some sort of a weekend workshop or summit or whatever.
mhm.
And for all, especially in this digital age, for all you know, the people who are taking these things are basically sitting there catching up on their inbox, but they're getting their code and they're getting their CEs. We do have people who are sincerely trying to learn, but there again, I have problems. As someone who, I spent 2 years becoming a certified DV advocate. In my opinion, anyone who works in the family court system should spend 2 years also becoming a certified DV advocate. And the reason for this is because when parents divorce, 95% of them never even go to court. They figure it out with the help of a couple of lawyers, maybe. They figure it out over the kitchen table together. Out of the 5% who does go to court, 75% of them have a violent person, an abuser among them. And so we call it a high conflict divorce, but it's not. It's a divorce with a high conflict co-parent.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
it is. I
Oh,
refuse
yeah.
to call it a high conflict divorce. It's not. It is divorce with a high conflict co-parent. It's as easy as the children are used to me doing everything for them. Let's just continue that for the children's sake versus I'm mad that you're leaving. I'm mad that you saw through me. I'm mad that you're embarrassing me. I'm going to make you suffer. I don't care about these children, but man,
Yes.
like I do. And so
Yes.
I'm going to go for 50-50 because the courts really love that. And they love a dad who's interested, an abuser who's interested, or whoever that's interested, whether the abuser is a mom or a dad. I mean,
Yeah.
statistically, we know the statistics on that. But either way, my point is we are in a situation where there isn't a realization of what coercive control, gaslighting, domestic violence, the silent treatment, all of it looks like.
Yeah.
The other piece would be biases. We do have people who are biased in favor of, just seeing a father or a mother get custody versus looking at who is the abuser here. Yes, statistically, it's more likely to be the male,
Yeah.
whether the male has a female partner or a male partner, as a matter of fact.
Mhm.
Fine. But to have a bias coming in and without the training that I would want, these things
Mhm.
alone, I think, would move the needle in such a huge, huge way. And then we could see, once we boil that down, what is left over,
Yeah.
right? So we
Mhm.
have all of this legislation, we have all of this stuff that we do have in place, but one has to want to adopt it. One has to understand how to adopt it, which is why I talked about the trickle down amount of time you need to wait before
Yeah.
people understand really how to put these laws into place, which of course is an unpopular thing to say. I'll be accused of saying it's untrue, but I'm just going off of what we see, which is that it is very, very hard to get people to just let kids continue doing what they're doing and see through the whole, oh, well, the reason that the abuser is interested in kids now is because it's a wake up call and the abuser now realizes, the parent now realizes what they've been missing. But that's
Mhm.
not the case. We
Yeah.
come back to court with these clients and we say, for someone who proclaims to have missed the children, when this parent gets a hold of the children, this parent puts them in front of the television or drops them off at this parent's mother's house or sister's house,
Yes. Mhm.
girlfriend's house, instead
Yeah.
of actually parenting these children, when the children could actually be with their parent and see their extended family
Yeah.
every weekend with dad or whatever it might be, right? Whatever the
So Renee, this is fascinating to me because I've gone through some of this, and also I have friends and family, so I get it. But what keeps you motivated and so passionate about your work?
I think it's well, there's two things that keep me motivated. One is that it's the same thing I tell moms, like we are here for you as a victim. Our top priority here is going to be your children, right? And in safeguarding, helping you to figure out how to safeguard your children, that's going to safeguard you too.
Yeah.
The other thing that keeps me motivated, quite frankly,
Mhm.
is just making sure that I take care of my own wellness.
Good
It really
point.
Yeah, I use a what's called a zero-based calendar, which means that my calendar looks completely full. If you look at it, there isn't a single empty space, but that's because I have time for meetings, time for heads down work on the client work and the business. But then I also have the yoga class, I have the meditation, I have the lunch break and the walk. These are meetings I've made with myself that I honor. I make sure that I actually do, not just schedule my kiddos' dentist appointments, but my own as well.
Yeah,
You
you're ahead of the curve. You really are, because as a caretaker now, that position, um, that's why I needed the 4 day solo cruise. But I go for my nails or a facial or something like that, or lunch with the girls.
Yes.
When my kids don't live in the same state as I do, his children, my children, our children, we're in Florida. They're in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and the siblings are in Pennsylvania. So it's not like I have assets here. And it's just that it's scheduling that self-care even, and I'm going to tell you what, this is part of my self-care. This, because he has a tendency not to talk much.
Mm.
And I'm a talker. So if you're living with somebody that doesn't talk much and you are not able to meet with other people as much as you would like, it can get you very depressed.
It
So
can.
for me, I'm not only trying to help women with all kinds of issues, which if you have listened to my show, you know it varies everything we talk about. But yeah, so this is an outlet for me. I love this. This
It's
gives me identity.
absolutely brilliant because and so I am like a very good we have a good synergy here because I am not much of a talker, and so as someone who's a consultant and a strategist,
Yeah.
whenever I do appear in a podcast or do a speaking engagement or even just meet with a client, I actually have to have some downtime each day, or else I become overstimulated and a
Mhm.
little anxious. And so I love that we're each finding that it's like no matter who we are, you have to find a way to honor that,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
and that's so true. And I talked about, and then we'll end this soon because our time is running out. But I talked about legacy on one show because uh, writing the first book was one thing, but then I liked it and I wrote several more books, different venues, not all. The first one was a memoir, and so that was nonfiction. And then I wrote. I found out that my father is 100% Irish. He was adopted. And that was fascinating to me. We grew up totally thinking we're Italian. So I did the research, which, like you, I love doing the research. That book came out. And then the podcast came out. It just all worked together, but I also have to, and I found this out. I cannot schedule two podcasts in one day. It's too
mm,
much. So what you were talking about, I can't
yeah,
do that. I have to make sure I get the balance, because I get very passionate with the subject, no matter what it is, and talking about it and wanting to know more about it or sharing my own experiences. So it can be draining.
yes,
But you were
yes,
a lovely guest. I mean, I enjoyed it so much, and I think our listeners, a lot of who need this information will get it. And being in that spot, being in domestic abuse at one time in my life and going through things with children, which I shared, um, I wish I had this information then. Maybe it would have helped a
yeah.
lot.
We always hope to reach people as they need us, when they need us. And I'm a great believer of people happening upon information like this just when they're ready to receive it.
That's absolutely true. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I always believe that. And thank you for coming today. And hopefully we will be together again doing something because we do have a synergy. I felt it too.
Thank you
So thank
again.
you so much for coming. And I hope my listeners enjoy this as much as I did.